This video is brought to you by NVIDIA and Galax RTX ray tracing enabled GPUs. Control was a very good video game. A unique idea well executed, a studio confident in their style, shooting mechanics leveraging years of industry-leading expertise, environmental destruction the likes of which we've never really seen, and the first truly RTX ray trace enabled game showcasing lighting that felt like the next gen had arrived early. There were some problems though. Some of the action was a little too thick at times, particularly towards the end of the game. Boss battles were generally more frustrating than fun. Checkpoints were really bad. The writing was an acquired taste, with some people loving its stilted back and forth peppered with internal monologue, while others, myself included, felt like it could have done with a few rewrites. Bottom line, this game was nominated for a few dozen Game of the Year awards, and it won a whole bunch of them. It has a very respectable 82 Metacritic score, and even if you don't enjoy specific parts of it, it still has more than enough charm to make it worth your time. If you haven't picked it up yet, I very much recommend doing so. At the time of launch, Remedy outlined plans for 2 paid story-driven expansions to be released in 2020. The first one, The Foundation, came out a few weeks back, and since there's not a lot of new stuff coming out in the next few months, I figured I'd check it out. I'm pleased to report that it's more Control, which means that it's good and it's worth your time, and I'd recommend it. But it's also more Control, which means it's still full of some bullshit that might piss you off if this game's voodoo hasn't transfixed you like it has others. The Foundation continues Jesse Faden's story seamlessly. She's the director, the oldest house is still batshit crazy, and it's up to her to calm it the fuck down. A few minutes spent refamiliarizing yourself with keybinds and menus, and you'll eventually figure out that there's a mission marker to go answer that creepy telephone somewhere where you go. Turns out the Foundation is a rather ingenious synonym, referring to both the process of forming an organization and the lowest part of every building on which the rest is built. The Foundation DLC expansion tells the story of the forming of the Federal Bureau of Control, or at least it's taking up residence in the oldest house. And that story is told in the deepest, darkest, reddest depths of the building's foundation. The Foundation's setting is both new and familiar at the same time. Its red sands invoke a Mars-like affect, while its protruding, squared stalactites provide a visual grounding reminiscent of the brutalist architecture, the stone quarry, or the astral plane. In the Foundation, space is at a premium, but it's all used rather smartly. You can traverse the entirety of the map in just a few minutes once you've unlocked it all, but its density is very much on par with what you've come to expect from the rest of the game. Each new cavern is its own space, full of documents to sift through, enemies to clear out, and puzzles to solve. There's a sense of verticality to much of it that you can't fully appreciate just looking at a 2D view of the map. The warehouse area is the best showcase of this, a towering monolithic structure that's true size only reveals itself with time and exploration. You'll spend more than an hour and a half in this narrow space alone unpacking its secrets. It never feels drawn out though. Each new discovery feels satisfying, mirroring the best moments of exploration to be found in the main game. After some opening scene setting and exploration, the Foundation hits its stride when you reach the Nail. Yet another monolith, only this time broken. It's driven itself into the heart of the oldest house, and its corruption threatens the Bureau. You must collect 4 MacGuffins to save the day, each of them hidden away in a corner of the newly explorable areas. Immediately, the Foundation offers up a clever twist whereby you choose the new upgrade you get access to, and that choice will affect your playthrough path. One option lets you manipulate the stalactites so that you can use them as platforms and weapons, while the other lets you destroy them with your service weapon. In a Metroidvania-inspired bit of level design, choosing either of these opens up 2 wings of exploration, while the 2 remaining wings become accessible after that. It's novel, and each path is still littered with areas requiring the alternative upgrade option, encouraging you to later return if you want to explore every nook and cranny. The new abilities look pretty rad, but their functionality is kind of a mixed bag. They feel very at home with your ability to levitate and use the environment to your advantage, but pulling out formations from the wall to use as platforms is more frustrating than it ought to be due to some wacky targeting and hitboxes. Where they don't work as well is in combat. One of the gimmicks is the ability to raise rock while enemies are standing on top of it so as to skewer them, but given that this is the same button used to pull and hurl objects, and given that the target boxes for these rock formations is ridiculously small and finicky, it's almost too risky to try doing this. Speaking of combat, yeah, it's back. You'll be shooting stuff. There's a new enemy added, which is essentially just a hiss zombie with a pickaxe. It's, I guess it fits thematically, but they don't exactly add much to the suite of enemies. These guys just run at you like lemmings and you can fly above their heads to render them pretty harmless. Any challenge you're likely to experience while playing through this is from the enemies you've encountered earlier, but it still works because combat and control remains excellent. The Foundation is ultimately an exercise in leaning into what already works in Control. Level design is compelling, mixing visual awe with a surprising mastery of space, exploration, and traversal. The world building is top tier. Combat is always thrilling, and unlike the base game, it doesn't try to crudely jack the difficulty by hurling endless enemies at you. It's more control, which is generally a good thing. I say generally because, yeah, it's more control, and for me, that means that all the perfections inherent in the experience are retained. You're still going to be going into your inventory every 10 or 15 minutes to clear out your mods because Remedy thought it would be a good idea to put this shit into their game. You're still going to have some truly astonishingly bad checkpoints, including one that really destroys the pinnacle moment of the entire expansion. A musical number that I won't spoil for you here, but it's really good the first time you do it, and it's really not when you have to play through the whole thing 4 times because the checkpoints are so bad. The biggest thing for me remains the writing and the characters, which are just... I really don't like how they talk and how they look. They're just so weird, like weird Disney puppets from some malfunctioning ride at Disneyland. The Foundation has a pretty good story when the game shuts up and lets you read between the lines, but the minute characters open their mouths and start explaining shit to you, I just can't get out of there fast enough. But look, here's the deal. I don't go back and play many story DLCs. I typically put the game down at release and I don't come back to it after that. I can honestly say that it's worth booting up Control again to play this DLC. It's $15 for 4.5 hours worth of content, which is a lot less than what other games are charging for the same amount. It's a direct continuation of Control's storyline, and it's more of what made Control great without fixing any of its problems. For me, I just enjoyed the excuse to revisit a game that I very much enjoyed the first time around, so even if the DLC wasn't as fleshed out as it was, I think I still would have enjoyed myself. Either way, it's rare to find DLCs worth getting out of bed for, and I think the Foundation falls into that category. Anyway, that's the review of the DLC. Let's talk now about RTX ray tracing and DLSS in Control, and why it's the other reason you should boot up Control again, even if you don't plan on playing the expansion. So if you're unfamiliar with what ray tracing is, here's the super simple, super quick explanation. Ray tracing is a technique that makes light in video games behave as it would in real life. Right now, video game developers have to manually manage the behavior of light, which takes time, and it also doesn't arrive at the most realistic looking product. What ray tracing does is simulate light using an algorithm, so the developer doesn't need to manually finesse it in quite the same way, and the final result is far more realistic. There's a lot wrong with that definition, but let's just roll with it for now. Back when I reviewed Control, I said it will be remembered as the first truly ray traced enabled game. I said that because while ray tracing was available before that, the performance cost of it was just too damn high. I played games like Battlefield or Metro and found that while I could get ray tracing to work, I had to drop from like native 4K or even 1440p down to 1080p just to keep the frame rate steady. It was a compromise that was worth it when the tech was firing on all cylinders, but it did feel like a big sacrifice. Since then, ray tracing optimization has been improving for all games, so we're definitely seeing better frame rates in a lot of titles, but there was still one piece of the puzzle that was missing, and that piece was DLSS. DLSS stands for Deep Learning Super Sampling, so this is also pretty hard to explain, so here's a super quick and not great explanation of how it works. Let's say that the Mona Lisa took Da Vinci 1 million brushstrokes to paint, yeah? DLSS is a technique that finds a way to recreate a near identical image using only, say, 250,000 brushstrokes. That means you get an image that looks nearly identical, requiring only 1/4 of the processing power from your painter. This feature hasn't been great up to this point because the feature hasn't been delivering the sort of performance uplift that would make it really worthwhile. But last month, Nvidia released DLSS 2.0, which is a huge deal. I played through the Foundation at 1440p resolution, but because of DLSS, my machine was actually rendering it at a much lower resolution while looking identical to 1440p. What this means is that I could set every graphical setting to max and turn on every single ray tracing feature, and I got a consistent 80 frames a second. Turned DLSS 2.0 off and I got around 40 frames a second. I essentially doubled my frame rate with no loss in image quality with the press of a button. That's insane. Now, this is a sponsored shout out, so you have to take what I say with a grain of salt. I very strongly recommend you check out Digital Foundry, who are the go-to graphical analysis gurus on YouTube. They did a video which was not sponsored, and they found exactly what I did. They ran tests at both 1440p and 1080p, and they got up to a 125% increase in frame rates using DLSS 2.0. I'll leave a link to that video in the description below. So yeah, this is a game changer. We're all waiting for next-gen consoles right now, but with these updates from Nvidia, it genuinely feels like next-gen has already arrived for PC. If you have an RTX card already, I really recommend booting up Control again to see for yourself how well this runs with full ray tracing. And if you don't have an RTX card, I very strongly recommend the Galax range, which is what I use in general and for this review. It's a really great time to grab an RTX card because, well, for example, Minecraft just got a ridiculous update, and I know most of you probably don't play Minecraft, but holy shit, this thing's actually really impressive. And later in the year, Cyberpunk is going to be coming out with full ray tracing enabled from launch. That's going to be pretty nuts. So yes. If you're interested in Galax cards, I'll leave a link in the description below, so check that out. Thanks to them, and thanks Nvidia for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.